Stephen Johnson. Stephen Johnson is the co-founder and editorial director of NotebookLM, and today we'll talk about his journey through journalism and writing nonfiction to joining Google Labs to build AI tools for research and writing. Over to you.
Hey everyone, delighted to be here. My first time to Poland, first time to Warsaw. It's really exciting to get to talk to you all about Notebook and how I got to this project, which I think is particularly relevant to this context, a journalistic context, a publishing context. First, I just want to have a brief show of hands. How many people have used NotebookLM in this room? Oh, that's so great. Thank you. I appreciate that you guys are using it. I'll do a little explanation of what the product is for those of you who haven't seen it, and give you some examples of how folks are using it in the newsroom and some interesting new developments that we're really excited about. But I wanted to just explain a little bit about my background. As Juliet mentioned, I have spent most of my career as an author, as a journalist, writing books about science and innovation and technology. But I'd always been interested over that whole process in discovering new ways that I could use software to help me with the writing, the research, the thinking process that created those books and the journalism that I wrote. So I'd always been an early adopter of new tools. And actually, I'm going to date myself terribly, but this goes all the way back to my sophomore year in college in 1987. I don't know if anybody here remembers this application. This was an app that came out for the Mac in the early days of the Mac, and Apple released. It was called HyperCard, and it was kind of a personal knowledge management tool, as we would now call it, a tool for thought. It had elements of what would become the web. It had a kind of hypertext architecture, and you could compile these kind of note cards. You would create a stack of note cards, and you could kind of customize them to organize the information in the way that you wanted to. And I got obsessed with building a HyperCard stack to help me with my note-taking for my classes in school. And I lost so many hours building this dream tool to help me with my studies in college that I kind of stopped going to my classes, actually. It was one of those obsessions. But it planted this seed in my mind that persisted for decades after that of this dream of using software to help me write and help me think. And eventually I started kind of writing about the tools that I was using to help me with the books. And I would write articles for the New York Times or Wired, sometimes blog posts about the latest tools I'd adopted. I was using tools like DevonThink and Evernote and Scrivener. Some of you may be familiar with these. And some of the early Google tools. Search was important. Google Scholar was incredibly important. And so I wrote a little bit about the tools in this book of mine, Where Good Ideas Come From, that came out in 2010, that was basically about what does it mean to collaborate with the machine in helping you think and helping you advance your writing and your research. And then in the spring of 2022, about 7 months before the ChatGPT moment, I wrote a 10,000-word piece for the New York Times Magazine that was basically saying, there are these new language models that are coming. They have a lot of complexity to them. They have a lot of problems. We haven't figured out the right software interface for them yet, but they are the real deal. This is going to be an absolute transformation in how software works, and it's going to change everything about how we use technology, and we need to take it seriously and think about the opportunities and also think about the risks. This piece was the most controversial thing I've ever written in my life. It got so much pushback on Twitter. Everyone was like, Johnson fell for the hype. He's so naive about these language models. So it was very painful to actually live through that. But there were two people at Google who had been reading my work over the years. They had read Where Good Ideas Come From. They were following my Substack. They read this article. One of them was a guy named Clay Bavor, who's since left. The other is a guy named Josh Woodward, who runs Google Labs and now runs the Gemini app. And they had this idea of bringing me to Google to help build this dream research tool that I've been chasing my entire life since I was in college. And so they called me out of the blue and said, hey, you don't know us, but we're wondering if you would want to come to Google, and actually we've got a small team that can help you, and we'll just build this piece of software that you've always wanted. Would you be interested in that? And I said, yes, I would be very interested in that. Thank you very much. And so somehow, here we are 3 years later, and that little project that started with just 3 of us kind of spitballing ideas in July of 2022 has turned into NotebookLM. It's now one of Google's flagship AI products. It's integrated into Workspace, into Cloud. We have a lot of student users, so it's part of Classroom now, and we're seeing it being adopted in newsrooms all around the world. It's been really exciting to see. About a year ago, we had this breakout viral moment when we released this feature called Audio Overviews, which I think some of you have heard, which turns your source material into a simulated podcast. Since then, we've been growing at an amazing rate, and we've been really excited to see all the love that has come towards this product. For those of you who haven't seen it, the most important thing to understand about Notebook is that everything in the product is grounded in the information that you upload, the sources, as we call them, that you provide. So you cannot do anything in NotebookLM without adding your own documents to the product. So you are not having a general conversation with a model that knows a little bit about everything. You're having a conversation with a model that is focused exclusively on the documents you've provided. And you can imagine why this is so important for a journalistic context, because you have research, say, you have interview transcripts, you have information that you're trying to gather and reporting you're trying to gather to write an article or to fact check an article. Notebook will actually give you the confidence that you're working with the information that you've added. You can personalize it so that it's not just kind of general interest knowledge. And we've designed the software so that everything is really, there's supposed to be a graphic here, but never mind, it didn't come through. Everything is grounded in your sources, and we always prioritize that original human knowledge. Like we were talking about in the opening remarks about the value of the original authorship and the original reporting. Everything in Notebook is oriented to not to replace that human expertise with an AI, but to use AI as a guide to help you understand that knowledge. And so the sources are visible and readable in the application. We have the most advanced citation system of any AI product out there, so that you get, as I'll show you, you get inline citations for every fact that the model gives you when you ask a question that take you directly back to the original passage that you're working with. And it just basically means you're always one click away from the original source. And that is, we find, really transformative, particularly in a journalistic context where you really need to stick to the facts and you need to stick to your reporting. So I'll give you one example of this. I don't know if this video is going to play immediately when I switch over to it. Maybe it will, or maybe, yes, okay, so maybe I'll go back and just set the stage here. So, ooh, that pauses it. How fantastic. Okay, so this is a notebook that I've created that basically is a collection of about a dozen interview transcripts with astronauts and flight directors from the NASA space program in the United States, and a few articles. So imagine I am like reporting, thinking about, in this case, I'm thinking about creating a podcast series about the culture of innovation at NASA during the 60s. And so I've got in this notebook on the left-hand side, I've got all my sources here. There is about 1 million words of information in this notebook. You can have tens of millions of words of information in just a single notebook. And once you've loaded all those sources, they can be PDFs, they can be docs, they can be slides, they can be audio, they can be video, I mean, a whole range of different formats. Once you've loaded that information in, you can ask these kinds of questions that is just unthinkable that a piece of software can answer them effectively if you think about where we were just 2 years ago. So in this case, the question I've asked down at the bottom, I'm interested in creating a podcast series about the culture of innovation. Give me an overview of the 5 most surprising insights about that topic, including quotes from the oral history interviews. So now Notebook goes through all of that. I think this is playing. It goes through all of the, yes, all that information in about, kind of 20 seconds. It will generate an incredibly detailed explanation. It'll pull out the 5 most surprising insights. It'll talk about the Apollo fire. It'll give me a quote from Dr. Christopher Kraft talking about the Apollo fire. It'll give me another quote from Frank Borman. And then you can see those little citations that are in here. That is the hypertext kind of like citation system, I can hover over them just to see the original quote, or I can click on one of them and it takes me directly to the passage in the original source, so I can read it in its entirety, I can read it in context. So I'm moving through a vastly complex information space, and I'm asking a question that is very semantically complex. You know, I'm not just searching for a keyword here. I'm asking it for it to synthesize the most surprising insights so that I can assemble the research that I need and write the best story or create the most compelling podcast. So that kind of work is just amazing in terms of the craft of journalism itself. The other thing we have is this studio panel. And the studio panel is where audio overviews live. We're adding many, many features there. That's where you take your sources and you transform them into some other new format. We now have flashcards and quizzes for students. We have an amazing feature called mind maps, which is incredible for navigating large amounts of information. I wanted to show you one that I made. I'm researching a book about the California gold rush, and I made a video overview. This is our new format. And what it does is that it creates basically a mini lecture, about 7 or 8 minutes long, with slides, and it uses Google's amazing new Nano Banana imaging model to illustrate your slides. And it's really quite incredible. You have different visual styles. I've chosen the paper cut paper setting for this one, and I just want to show you just a little bit of this video overview. We're rolling out these new image features this week, so they'll be available in the product soon.
Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when we think of Yosemite Valley, we picture this perfect, untouched wilderness, right? A total masterpiece of nature. But the story of how it was discovered, well, it's not a peaceful story of exploration. It's actually the story of an invasion, a hidden war fought for this exact piece of land. So picture this. It's March 1851. A militia, the Mariposa Battalion.
There's some amazing other illustrations there, but we don't have that much more time. But you'll see, go to the video overviews in the next week or two, try these new styles. We have a bunch of different styles. It's really incredible. Like, I have curated that content with my own research, my own ideas. I've instructed the model on what I want the video overview to be about, which draws on my talents as an historian, as a journalist, but I can't illustrate the way that the AI can. So it's as if I've been able to kind of augment my talents with this amazing other superpower that I would never be able to do to create these beautiful illustrations to accompany my work. Finally, I really am excited about this new direction for Notebook. Up until now, we've been largely thinking about it as a productivity tool for individuals and for teams, but we also think it is a tool for publishing and distributing information. It's a fantastic way to bundle information about a community. You can imagine notebooks that are built around all the local school board meetings or all the community council meetings, all the interview transcripts from all those meetings that no one wants to read, no one wants to send a beat reporter to cover because it's too local. You could bundle all of that into a notebook and publish it and allow residents of each neighborhood to go and ask questions in that notebook or generate their own audio overviews. We think it's an amazing way to open up coverage of domains that otherwise wouldn't be covered. We've created a set of featured notebooks that we launched earlier this summer. This is the initial lineup. Some of them are public domain. We have an entire notebook filled with the works of William Shakespeare, like everything Shakespeare ever wrote in a single notebook. But we also have partnered with leading publications like The Economist and The Atlantic and Simon & Schuster with their author, Eric Topol. And these are curated packages of information. So there's information about travel, there's information about health, there's information about economic trends from The Economist. And we are really excited about expanding this program. We're going to be launching new featured notebooks at a regular pace starting in about 2 or 3 weeks. And so we think Notebook as a platform is useful not just for actually creating journalism, but also for distributing journalism. And because the whole system has been designed to prioritize and foreground and keep the reader focused on that original reporting, that original writing, we think it's a tool that newsrooms around the world are going to embrace. So thank you all for listening. If there's one question, I'm happy to answer. I think we have a little bit of time. Yeah, all the way in the back there. Oh, we have a mic coming to you. Yeah.
I teach journalism, and I think that's like what I don't trust and what my students don't trust, is trying to teach a machine a human emotion, and then as a reporter, how do you believe, hey, out of these million words, did this machine really find what is the most surprising thing?
Yeah, it's one of the properties of the models that I have been the most surprised by, actually, is that they do have an intrinsic ability to pick out things that are interesting. And I think there's a reason why that is, because the language models on their own are prediction machines, right? What they do is they predict the next tokens, right? That's how they work under the hood. And so what surprise is something that deviates from your predictions of what you were thinking, right? You thought there was going to be this, but there was this new information that you didn't expect. And so I think there's something about the way that language models work that make them actually quite good at detecting interesting, surprising news. However, you can also customize that. So I do this all the time in my Gold Rush research. I have extensive notes about what I've been thinking and what I've been reading about, and where my head is at in the project. I will upload a new source, and I will say to NotebookLM, given what you know about what I know already and what I'm interested in and what I've been focused on so far, what's the new information in this new document that will be news to me? And it effectively does a very sophisticated, like, kind of compare and contrast between my knowledge and the new knowledge coming in from the document. And I'm able to, in a sense, get a pre-read for the document before I sit down to read it in its entirety, because the model has an image in its head, in a sense of like where my knowledge is. So they're quite good at doing that kind of query. Do we go for one more, or are we? Okay, one more. Yes, right up in the front.
Thank you a lot for the great tool. My question is following. I'm Belarusian, and it's a great tool to transcribe the Belarusian language. It's worked very well. So what is your, how you solving the problem of small scale languages? Like, why it's so good? Or
how are we dealing with smaller scale languages?
yes.
Yes. So this is an underlying.
What is the secret? What is the secret?
What is the secret? Okay. Well, this is actually based on work that comes out of Google DeepMind. So it's really the multilingual skills of the underlying Gemini model. And Notebook now supports over 80 languages around the world. And that's just because Gemini beneath the hood is so fluent. And Google has just an amazing long history. I mean, Google Translate was one of the first breakthrough neural net applications in history. And so we on the Notebook team have this amazing benefit. I mean, you can upload sources in Japanese, have a conversation about those sources in Polish, and then output an audio overview in English. And the model doesn't really see languages as a barrier in this way. So just as a translation tool, Notebook is super powerful in that way. But it's not my team's work. It's the people at Google DeepMind that have been doing that work. All right, thank you all very much. Hope you get a chance to check it out.